quickly took the test. It was 16 questions long. So I just kind of went through. I mean, I was paying attention to you, so I didn't really pay that much attention to the test. So this might not be accurate. I'll have to retake it. But the results for me came back ambivalent right, which which I'm really surprised by.
When the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part.
Kim Iverson finally admitted that she is in fact a right-winger. This came rather surprising, and it was during a segment of The Hills Rising where they had an expert from Pew Research describing a recent political typology quiz that they developed. So let's watch this segment because it's very illustrative of the game that Kim Iverson plays. You know, she is definitely a right-winger. I would say not just a right-winger, I'd say a far-right winger who never really says what her ideology is. And most of her critique tends to basically echo the talking points that you see from other similar far-right figures, you know, Joe Rogan, Tim Pool, those others. The fact that she does have some views that are usually associated with the left in terms of like, and she'll explain this in terms of, you know, government spending, pro-immigration, etc., still does not hide from the fact that ultimately her political agenda is not left-wing in any way. And I did this quiz as well. I'm going to do the quiz live after I cover this little segment. And although the quiz, I don't think it's that great because I think it's too short, but perhaps it's as good as a quiz can get with only 16 questions, especially if it did manage to reveal Kim Iverson's true political inclinations. So let's watch this clip.
Any guesses where I am or where Kim is?
So, by the way, it's obvious that Ryan, you know, the whole point of Rising, back when Sagar and Crystal Ball were in it, was to have a left-wing populist, which was Crystal, you know, a Bernie surrogate, and a populist right-winger, Sagar and Jetty, you know, a Tucker Carlsonite style right-winger. It was obvious who was who. But now that they have three sort of mostly regular, I assume that it's Ryan Grimm, Kim Iverson, and Robbie Suave. Those are the ones that, you know, often there's some other hosts, but those are the three that are most of the time are on the show. Now, it's obvious what Ryan Grimm's political ideology is. He's obviously a leftist, obviously a progressive, and it's very obvious what Robbie Suave's ideology is. He is a conservative. But Kim is really the wild card there. You know, what is she? Why was she picked for this show? She's not a centrist, certainly not. So if they wanted to pick someone who was sort of middle of the road between Ryan and Robbie, Kim doesn't really fit that bill. And Kim usually ends up agreeing with the right-wing talking points. Usually, especially if they involve some critique of the left. So she presents her right-wing views mostly by attacking the left, not so much as like Robbie does, which is promoting the right. And that's what all these grifters do, because they don't want to be open about what they don't want to, you know, it's like Jimmy Dore. They don't want to reveal who they're catering for. So they don't openly support the right. What they do is just spend most of the time attacking the left. So yeah, let's keep watching.
Well, if you know us well enough.
No, I don't want to place anybody in groups. I will say that, you know, as I said, the quiz is out there. We think it's a great tool, not just for figuring out where you stand, but for comparing yourself to the population as a whole, and for comparing within groups. So, for example, the entire Hill TV staff could take the quiz, and you could take a look at how you compared to the rest of the population as a whole.
And the quizzes like this are always frustrating because you want like a slightly different answer to be in there, but that's not how a typology works. You don't get, you know, you don't, and it often ends up figuring it out, even though you think like the precise answer you wanted isn't necessarily in there.
We do ask some survey questions where our respondents will say, hey, wait a minute, I want a third option that's somewhere in the middle. But one thing we did in this typology compared to some of our previous efforts, we used less of those questions that really force you into one response or the other. We were able to mix up the survey questions this time around. And part of the ability to do that comes from the fact that we were using our online panel this time, which, conducting surveys online, there are some advantages, there are some disadvantages. But one advantage is that we can use a lot of different question formats that don't necessarily work in a traditional over-the-phone survey. So hopefully taking this quiz, you won't feel that way quite as much as you might have with our last edition of typology.
So I just quickly took the test. It was 16 questions long. So I just kind of went through. I was paying attention to you, so I didn't really pay that much attention to the test. So this might not be accurate. I'll have to retake it. But the results for me came back ambivalent right, which I'm really surprised by, because I answered initially on that first question that I am more for bigger government. And one of the questions asked me if I wanted more drastic changes with government programs. And I said, yes, I wanted more drastic, more robust changes to government programs. So,
not surprising at all. And, again, I think she is being honest about, we're going to see the quiz in a bit, but she is honest about the fact that, she probably wants more government intervention, which is usually a left-wing position. But there are other questions that I definitely, and she's not going to mention it right here, but I can definitely guess where she went with those that ended up with the results that, now, she's acting surprised. This is the funny thing. So let's imagine that Kim really doesn't want to tell people that she's right-wing. She really wants to hide it. She never wants to reveal the truth. Why would she say it on air? You could just lie. You know what I mean? Clearly, you had a chance to do this quiz beforehand, so you can, game the answers to know what result you will get. I think this is definitely a little dog whistle. This is basically saying to all the right-wingers who watch Rising, which I think is the majority of their audience, who watch Rising and who are wondering whether she's right-wing or not, because she always ends up supporting the right-wing talking points, always echoing what Joe Rogan says. This is like yeah, guys, I'm on your team. I'm on Team Red. That's what she just said. And by red, I mean red state, not red as in communist. No. This was definitely this was intended. There was a point. So, yeah. The acting surprising is just that, sort of, oh, well, I'm never going to openly say I'm right wing. I'm just going to leave it up in the air, but wink, wink, you all got the message.
So I'm interested as to why it would put me on the right, but the ambivalent right, the caption on it saying young and politically cross-pressured, conservative on economics and issues of race and gender, less so on immigration and social issues. So I think that's interesting because, I did on the survey answer that I was for immigration. I come from a family of immigrants, and that people speaking different languages doesn't bother me at all. Of course, I come from a multilingual home. So I'm curious as to why it would put me on the right.
She just kind of explained why. She clearly, she's only describing two answers, the one on government spending and the one on immigration. But she's not mentioning all the other questions that she could have answered as a right-winger. And that's very, very, very convenient for her. But after we're done here, I'm going to do the quiz. And then I'm going to do the quiz again, answering how I think Kim would answer. So wait for it.
I economically answered so far left.
Yeah, so there are obviously a lot of different dimensions at play in this type of survey, and some people are going to take it and feel like maybe this doesn't describe them well. But it does its best. The survey, the tool that we've placed online does the best job it can to balance out all of those competing attitudes. And so, as you mentioned, part of the description of that ambivalent right group is that they are cross-pressured in a way that a lot of the other groups aren't. The ambivalent right has a majority of folks who identify as or lean towards the Republican Party, but it also has a pretty significant number of Democrats in it. I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of a quarter to a third of the ambivalent right is made up of Democrats or Democratic leaners. So that is a group where people have much more mixed attitudes than, for example, the outsider left, which is sort of positioned across from the ambivalent right in the way we present these groups, but is much more consistently liberal across a wide variety of issues. And so some of the nuances here are really interesting, that the stress sideliners, the ambivalent right, there are those cross pressures.
By the way, I think the difference between the alt-right and I guess if you want to call it the alt-left, you know, the people like Kim Iverson or Jimmy Dore, who aren't really leftists. The difference between those two groups is that fundamentally the alt-left is not libertarian. The alt-right had a very big libertarian component to it. In terms of at least anything that had, except globalization. Like there is where they drew the line. But on general economic policy, a lot of them were very, very, like, you know, Charlie Kirk. I'm talking mostly not alt-right, perhaps I used the wrong word, but sort of the alt-light, you know, the Ben Shapiro's, Charlie Kirk, those guys. They tend to be very, very pro-market, very, very libertarian. Whereas the alt-left will share the same views on, you know, culture war and all that, but they still maintain, broadly speaking, kind of pro-government, you know, pro-Medicare for all, things like that. So again, this is not surprising from Kim.
Competing attitudes, whereas, as I said, among Democrats, there's a lot of agreement on a wide range of issues, everything from the minimum wage to taxes to the idea that more needs to be done on climate change right now. They might not agree on the details, but there's a lot of agreement on basic issue positions. And so expressing some of those competing attitudes could very plausibly lead our quiz to steer you into that ambivalent right category.
And Andrew, I just finished it, and it says that along with 6% of the public, I'm in the progressive left.
Yes,
that makes sense.
I'll take that.
Yeah, and the progressive left group is interesting. As you said, it's only about 6% of the population. That's the smallest of the 9 groups we identified. But because they are the most liberal group, and the same is true on the other side, the groups that have the people who are kind of the strongest partisan identifiers, as well as the most ideologically consistent, those are the people who are most likely to vote, to be most likely to say they follow politics closely. And so even though the progressive left is only 6% of the population, it's a much larger share of the voting public, for example.
Interesting.
So they represent a pretty significant share of the Democratic coalition, even though they look like the smallest group just in terms of raw percentages.
I slightly disagree with the idea of being partisan. I mean, yes, the progressive left will most likely vote Democrat, but they'll often do it sort of not being very big fans of the Democratic Party, you know, voting only because the alternative is so much worse. But, you know, the progressive left is way more cynical about the Democratic Party than, you know, the centrists, the liberals.
And we make a lot of noise on Twitter. Yeah.
Yes. Twitter we don't have stats for, but I imagine it would be an even larger share there.
Yeah, so interesting, so fascinating. So people can go and take this quiz at pewresearch.org. It is kind of down on the bottom of the page, and it talks about the typology. So people.
Okay, enough of this. Let's do the quiz. Ready? Here we go. Like I said, I'm going to do it first, answering, you know, what I would answer, but then I'm going to do it again, answering how I think Kim would answer. So this should be fun. Question 1. If you had to choose, would you rather have a smaller government providing fewer services, a bigger government providing? Obviously, a bigger government. When you say you favor bigger government providing more services, do you think it would be better to mostly expand on current ones, greatly expand on current ones? Clearly greater. Also, I am answering, you know, imagining myself as being American or living in the US, because the questions, as we will see later, are tailored towards a US audience. So I am putting my my Uncle Sam hat on right now. Which of the following statements comes closest to your view? America's openness to people all over the world is essential to who we are as a nation. If America is too open to people from all over the world, we risk losing our identity. Clearly, I am pro openness. I should add, my father had a dual nationality. He was a half Mexican, half American. So, there is a tiny bit of American in me. Let's see. In general, would you say experts who study a subject for many years are usually better at making good policy decisions about subjects other than people, usually subject than other people, usually worse at making good policy decisions about neither better nor worse at making good policy decisions? Okay, I'm gonna, I'm gonna break away from the populist. The populists will tend to want to answer either worse or neither better nor worse. I honestly disagree. Now, there are a lot of experts who have very bad takes on things. And as an economist, I know this very, very well. I have, often seen, Nobel Prize winning economists give the shittiest analysis on what's going on in the global economy. Being a professional journalist doesn't mean you're any good at analyzing politics either. Like, there's no guarantee that just by expertise you will have good political takes. Or will be sufficiently knowledgeable to promote right policies. Having said that, I do think that being an expert in your field gives you a bigger advantage than, first name bunch of numbers on Twitter. So, yes, I do agree that there is a necessity to have experts. And what I think we should do is the problem isn't so much that experts are giving bad advice. And the person who will always come to mind to people like Kim when answering this question is Dr. Fauci. Now, the thing here is Dr. Fauci is not a medical expert giving a medical opinion unbiased from politics. So he has a political role as well. And that political role means that he will often take decisions that have to weigh in the political element rather than just the medical scientific one. And that is very problematic. And that is when the anti-vaxxers say you're politicizing the pandemic or whatever, that's not what they mean. But that is what they should mean if they want that statement to make sense. Because yes, a lot of science is politicized. A lot of medical expertise during the pandemic is politicized because these people have a political role. Dr. Fauci's title is a political title. So, but this does not. But the difference is, would I put, Marjorie Taylor Greene to do Fauci's job? You gotta be fucking kidding me. Of course not. Or Ted Cruz or Ron DeSantis. Should these people be giving medical advice? Of course not. It's preposterous. So yeah, there we go. Yeah, the experts are better at making policy decisions, but this does not guarantee that they will be necessarily the best ones. Thinking about increased trade of goods and services between the US and other nations in recent decades, would you say that the US has gained more than it lost because increased trade has helped lower prices and increase the competitiveness of some US businesses, or lost more than it has gained because increased trade has caused drops in manufacturing and other industries and lowered wages? I am very much an anti-trade economist, or rather anti-free trade economist. So yeah, definitely lost more. I would scrap NAFTA or USMCA in a heartbeat, to be honest. How much more, if anything, needs to be done to ensure equal rights for all Americans, regardless of their racial or ethnic backgrounds? Definitely a lot. Like, definitely a lot. I have not lived in the US for an extended period for quite some time. And from what I see, things are just so much worse than when I graduated from high school there. Yeah, there were racial issues, of course, but it wasn't just so overwhelming as it is now. And yeah, I definitely, if I had answered this question 15, 20 years ago, I probably would have said a little, but now, yeah, definitely a lot. Which comes closer to your view about what needs to be done to ensure equal rights for all Americans, regardless of their racial or ethnic backgrounds? Most US laws and major institutions need to be completely rebuilt because they are fundamentally biased against some racial and ethnic groups. While there are many inequities in US laws and institutions, necessary changes can be made by working within the current systems. This is definitely a question where I'm falling into the issue that Ryan Grimm mentioned of like sometimes you wish you had a I wish there was an option of like, well, yeah, there are some laws and institutions that you can improve without necessarily scrapping them, but then others, you really need to, like policing in the U.S. is just so fucked up, so fucked up, um, that you really, really, it makes you think radically. It makes you think you really do need to. So even though I don't really agree with either of these two, I would err on needing to make more drastic changes than just marginal ones. But I don't think everything should be burned down and rebuilt. Which of the following statements comes closest to your view? Business corporations make too much profit. Most corporations make a fair and reasonable amount of profit. I'm a socialist. You can guess. I have no opposition to worker-owned businesses making too much profit, but capitalist ones, yeah. How much, if at all, would it bother you to regularly hear people speak a language other than English in public places in your community? Obviously not. And I mean, I was living in London until late last year, and London is probably the biggest melting pot in the world right now. I mean, you hear, there's no day where you just hear English walking around. So, yeah, doesn't bother me at all. Oh, this is a good one. On a scale of 0 to 100, where 0 means you feel as cold as negative as possible, and 100 means you feel as warm as and positive as possible, how do you feel towards the Democrats and the Republicans? Well, the Republicans is easy. 0. I mean, this is a far-right party that has just jumped on the crazy train and heading full speed ahead and forcibly removed the brakes. They are just gone. They're so off the deep end that there is just no way to bring them back into moderation. I think the only thing that could bring them into moderation is if they come to power and make a decision so disastrous that makes people realize just how wrong they were. And that's kind of how Nazism was defeated. It had to be defeated militarily. There was no way to negotiate Nazism away. So I fear that the only way that Republicans will be moderated is by them doing something really, really stupid, really, really harmful. Or you end up with a socialist in power that makes that actually improves living conditions, and they realize that it works. That all the things that they complained about over the last 30, 40 years actually was not true. Now, for the Democrats, I don't like them. I think they're an absolutely abhorrent party. They are corrupt as fuck, starting with Pelosi, probably the most corrupt politician not in the Republican Party. They are incompetent. They are useless. They don't care. They are basically also caught in this, in the big lobbying machine. They're in it for, they're not in it for any legacy. None of them is interested in making a mark on society or making a mark on politics. All they want is to make some money, make some fame, and then when they get kicked out of power in the next midterms, they'll get some consulting job or work in some lobbying firm. That's what they want. Now, I won't give them a 0 because at least on social issues, their rhetoric, at least their rhetoric, is much more inclusive. The Republicans just hate everyone who isn't white, whereas Democrats at least will give token support to minorities. Not that they actually do anything for it, but at least the rhetoric, like you just can't move forward with the kind of rhetoric that the Republicans have against every minority. So I will give them a 10 for that. And I'll give them another 10 for the fact that there are some Democratic lawmakers who are decent. I mean, Bernie Sanders is decent. The squad members are decent. Even some that I've lost a bit of of faith in, like Elizabeth Warren, I'd still, at least I do think that she does a better job than she does a bad job. So there are a few people who are worth it. So I'll give them a 20. Which of these statements best describes your opinion about the United States? The United States stands above all other countries in the world. The US is one of the greatest countries in the world, along with some others. There are other countries that are better than the US. Well, I'm afraid that I've lived in many of them. So, yeah, if you judge your nation's greatness by the number of Fortune 500 companies it has, or how many aircraft carrier battle groups it has, I don't think that you are judging it using the standards of what makes your life better than others. And in that respect, the standard of living in the US is way below most European countries. And you probably don't realize that until you've actually lived there. Until you realize the quality of the services you have in Europe, the quality of life you have in Europe, the fact that you can travel everywhere easily, cities aren't just, chaotic suburban sprawl. Yeah, obviously there are some things that the US has that Europe doesn't, has bigger spaces, has bigger houses, things like that. But in the end, I think the things that make life most livable, Europe does better. So, yeah. How much of a problem, if any, would you say each of the following are in the country today? People being too easily offended by things others say. Now, I do think that it is a problem, but I've always said this, like, leftists do need to get a thicker skin. Some of them do. And I do think that sometimes there is an urge to just, cancel people for whatever reason. I think this is a problem, but I could think of perhaps 20 or 30 bigger problems, maybe even more, maybe like 100 bigger problems than this. I don't think that this really manifests itself in any kind of huge drawback to society. I will repeat, the University of Austin, which ostensibly is there because campus culture is so rotten. Well, maybe it is in like certain humanities segments, but then usually these people don't end up making policy, and they say nothing about economics, which is unfortunately probably the most influential degree in a university, which is thoroughly right wing, and they never complain about that. So I don't think this is a problem in any. Well, I think it is a problem, just not one that really people should worry about. So I would put it as a minor one. People saying things that are very offensive to others. Now, I will definitely agree that this is a major problem, and I will say it because what this also includes is racism, homophobia, misogyny, transphobia, all these things that people now feel entitled to just, very, very liberally, be transphobic on Twitter. That's perfectly fine. Be anti-Semitic on Facebook. That's perfectly fine. And this wasn't the case many years ago. Definitely, social media has made this worse, and I do think it is very problematic. So it's not the issue of people need always to have thicker skins and take any sort of abuse and offense that others dish. Maybe those people who dish it need to calm the fuck down a bit and realize that offending others just for their own self-gratification is actually not a sign of a healthy mind. So, and yeah, there should be consequences to this. So yeah, I do think it's a major problem. Which comes closer to your view of candidates for political office? Even if neither is exactly right, I usually feel like... Oh, so this poll was posted on November 9, so right after the election. I'm not a fan of Biden. I think he's an absolutely abhorrent politician. So, no. In general, how much do white people benefit from advantages in society that black people do not have? This is a no-brainer for me, like a no-brainer. If you really think that any answer aside from the first two is the reality. Yeah, you have not spoken to many black people. So I'll just leave it at that. Do you think greater social acceptance of people who are transgender, people who identify as gender that is different from the sex they were assigned at birth, is also a no-brainer? I mean, I think trans people, like any other minority, they have rights, and we need to respect that right. We need to accept the fact that they exist, because that's a thing. A lot of people don't want to admit that they even exist. They want to present this as being like a mental illness or something, and it's just not true. And the leeway that we've given to people to just in public say the most transphobic shit imaginable, whether it's J.K. Rowling, whether it's Dave Chappelle, whatever. Yeah, this is kind of like the social battle of our day right now, and I am 100% in favor of respecting trans rights in every possible way. Overall, would you say people who are convicted of crimes in this country deserve too much time in prison, too little time in prison, about the right amount of time in prison? This might shock some people. I have some views on criminality that might approach sort of right-wing territory. I'm a big fan of justice should be about restitution of a crime. I'm not a legal scholar, so I don't know exactly what the terms are, but I basically think, crimes that involve, theft, things like that, those really don't deserve people to go to jail for like 5 years. I mean, it's ridiculous, especially because it ends up hurting poor people. On the other hand, I think things like murder, especially premeditated murder, I think if you murder someone, you've forfeited your right to be in society. And I would totally favor life in prison for people who murder others. I am morally in favor of the death penalty, though as a practicality, I think innocent people would be killed. So I would not promote the state having a role in murdering innocent people. So I am in practice very much against the death penalty. But from a moral perspective, I do think some people, if you kill someone else, you deserve to die. I mean, I don't see how, just repenting and, 20 years in jail and you're fine after that. No, you killed someone. That person's not coming back. You can build a life after 20 years in jail. Someone lost their husband or son, or you don't deserve, you're gone to society. But like I said, in the US, you have a country where, 3 strikes laws in many states means that you could rob a grocery store 3 times, and that 3rd time you're going to end up life in prison. That is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. So I'm a big fan of, severely punishing the really bad deeds, murder, rape, child abuse, whatever. But I'm also in favor of not punishing the things that we can make up for. But in the US, I definitely think there are too many people in jail that should not be in jail, especially people who are in jail because of drugs. They should not be in jail. Which of the following statements comes closest to your view? Religion should be kept separate from government policies. Government policies should support... I'm atheist. Atheist leaning towards non-theistic Satanism. I like Satan. I listen to too much heavy metal and watch too many horror movies to not like Satan. So, yeah. If it was Satanism, I might think about it. In the future, do you think US policies should try and keep it so America is the only military superpower? Would be acceptable if another country became as military powerful as the US? I don't think the US should actively prevent other countries from becoming militarily powerful. For the simple reason that the United States, by virtue of being the largest military in the world, by far, they are the biggest threat to every other nation on Earth. It's only Americans who don't realize this. But every other country has far more to fear from the US than the US has to fear from any other country. So yes, I am a big fan of every country having the right to militarize as much as they want. Even though I am, broadly speaking, a pacifist, I am all for countries, building up their militaries if they feel they want to. It's their choice. And that includes nuclear weapons. Because the Non-Proliferation Treaty said very clearly that part of the treaty was about the existing nuclear powers would work towards eliminating them, and they haven't eliminated them. So, from my perspective, every single signatory, as well, the nuclear powers, are in violation of that treaty, and there's no reason why any other country should necessarily follow it. So, yeah. And drum roll. Not a surprise. Obviously not a surprise. Progressive left. 6% of the public. 7% of registered voters and 8% of 2020 voters. And these are the other categories. So progressive left, establishment liberals, democratic mainstay. I wonder what's the difference. Outsider left, stressed sideliners, ambivalent right, populist right, committed conservatives, faith and flag conservatives. I think Kim Iverson really, like that quiz was very generous to her. I think she deserves more of a populist right banner than ambivalent right. But yeah, no surprises on my part in any way. Now, let's do this quiz again. I'm going to rush through it. I'm not going to read the whole questions anymore. I just want to rush through it now that we all know the questions and answer how I think Kim would answer. So let's see if we nail the ambivalent right. So here we go. First question, bigger government. She admitted that that's what she chose, and I have no reason to disbelieve her on this. So, yeah. America is openness to people around the world. Yeah, I also have no reason to disbelieve her views on immigration. And, she is half Asian. She sort of, I got the impression when she was answering, when she said what her views were, I got the impression that she was sort of leaning into that kind of Tim Pool territory of well, I'm half Asian, or in Tim Pool's case, quarter Asian, therefore I can't be racist. Ironically, right-wingers always love, the anti-woke crowd loves to use identity politics to their benefit all the time. You had this from Milo Yiannopoulos onward. How would you say expert? Oh, being a populist, yeah, worse. I mean, her whole anti-vax rants and all this. She definitely chose this one. Think about increased trade of goods. I think on economics she is left. So, yeah. How much more, if anything, is equal rights for all Americans, regardless of their age? See, now we're in the territory of, Kim Iverson, the white supremacist sympathizer. And I think she probably does recognize that there is some racism in the country, but I don't think she would want to do much about it. Which of all things, business corporation make two? Yeah, again, all the economic ones, I think she is left. How much, if at all, would it bother you to regularly hear people speak a language? Yeah, not at all. Definitely, she said so. So now here's a good one. On the Democrat-Republican ones, I think she scored a 0 for Democrats because all her political views are basically anti-left, not so much pro-right. And on the other hand, I have a suspicion that she might, if it came down to, a bland centrist liberal Democrat and a populist Republican, it would be, she would vote Republican. So I'm going to be generous. I would suspect that she voted more than 20, but I'm going to give her 20. Just to echo my own 20. But I probably think she might have picked 30 or 40. Which of these statements best describes your opinion about the United States, U.S.? Now, some of her views are sort of in tanky territory, but on the other hand, I'm not quite sure she hates the U.S. That much. I would probably think she picked this. I could be wrong. How much of a problem would you say each of following? People are easily too offended. Oh yeah, she's totally all the woke questions. She definitely voted as a right winger. So very offensive to other, not a problem. Which comes closer to your view of candidates for political office? Yeah, none of them, I don't think. How much do white people benefit from advantages in society? Again, she has been on a bit of a white supremacist defending streak, so not too much. I mean, remember what her argument was during the Michigan shooter. She basically said that there was a risk that this would demonize white people. I mean, for Christ's sake. So yeah, I don't think she would pick any of the other ones. Do you think greater social acceptance of people who are transgender is? I don't know. I don't think she's transphobic, but I also don't see her defending trans rights in any way. So I'll pick yeah, neutral. Would you say people who are convicted of crimes in this country serve too much time? Well, if it's a white supremacist, if it's a January 6th rioter, they probably shouldn't be in jail. They should get a monument somewhere. I would think she put this. Yeah. Which of the following statements? Religion. I don't think she's religious. So yeah. In the future, do you think U.S. policy should keep it as the only acceptable of another? Yeah, like I said, some of her views are a bit tanky-ish. So you know, very pro-Russia, pro-China. So yeah. Ready? Drum roll. Yep. There we go. Not a surprise. Not a surprise. I think she voted very closely to what I just did. Yeah. 12% of the public, 11% of registered voters, 9% of 2020 voters. Fiscally conservative, socially moderate, relatively low political. I don't think this describes her very well. I think definitely I think the quiz did a good job of showing her right-wing colors. I just think it showed the wrong ones. But yeah. So on the whole, you know, if you want to do this quiz, I suspect most of the people who watch my channel or subscribe will probably fall into the progressive left category. I think there won't be much of an issue there. I think the problem with this quiz is it's too short. I mean, 16 questions is a bit too short, if you ask me. But maybe this is as good as you can get for 16 questions. And if it exposed the right-winger inside Kim Iverson, then it did a fantastic job, I would say. I think it worked. So, yeah, this is someone who will never admit what her real ideology is, because that is the game. That is how she reconciles kind of her left-wing anti-establishment types and also the right-wingers who are also now, you know, in this whole populist game that Rising plays and breaking, what's it called? Crystal and Sagar's new show, Breaking Points. That's the game that they play. This idea that left populists and right populists want the same thing. And it's not true. It's just not true. But yeah, glad we heard it from her own mouth. On that note, if you like this video, please like, please share, please subscribe. And a shout out to Clay, who sent me this this clip on Twitter. I had nothing to do a video on, and this came just perfect, absolutely perfect. When I saw that link, I was like, I have to do a video on it. So thanks again for sending me that link. And a reminder to any of you, if there's some issue, some news, whatever, that sounds interesting, sounds like something I'd cover, especially, you know, involving all these alt-left figures or right-wingers. If there is a video or something that you think that I might cover it, send me a DM on Twitter. I will definitely read it. No guarantees that I'll make a video on it, but I will definitely look at it. So thank you very much, and I will see you. Happy holidays. May you get all your presents, and more importantly, may Omicron not be one of them. So I will see you next time.